Hey, how you doing tonight? My name is Brant Hunt, and my channel is Discerning What is True. And I'm going to be talking to you about Harry Hoxsey. Uh, Very few people know who he is, but it needs to be spread upon the world to know who he was and what type of hero he really was. My chapter is going to be chapter 6 tonight in the book about Hoxsey. The title is Hoxsey versus the AMA. Twice, that is, thrice is his arm, who hath his world just, is the name of the title. And we're going to begin to read this particular book and share with you what is going on with him in Texas. My YouTube channel is Discerning What is True. I am also on Odyssey with the same title, Discerning What is True. The day is the 13th day of February 2023. My oh my, years go by really quick as you get a little older. So we're going to start with chapter 6 here. Again, thank you for being here. Um, Very few people know who this guy is, and a lot of people who do know him think that by the poison that the AMA's put out of him, he's a quack. But the real quack, as far as I know, is the American Medical Association folks, not the Hoxsey. It was a one man, seems to be a protege of trying to stand up for what is true and stood like very few people do. And eventually he lost in the long run, but in reality he won because a lady who worked for him began to work in Tijuana, Mexico, and has actually been successful in her entourage. So here we go. Intractably blocked by the AMA and Texas medical authorities, Hoxsey sought alternate routes to an investigation. With the World War over, he set his sights on the National Council Institute in 1945 through a friend who was a talent scout for USO shows. He met three congressmen, Representative Virgil Virgil Chapman of Kentucky, Harold Earthman, and J. Percy Priest of Tennessee. Both of those men are from Tennessee, who agreed to accommodate him to the NCI, National Council Institute. After also joining the expedition were Dr. Ira Drew, Dr. and Mrs. Sam Scornthorne, and two other doctors and a reporter from the Dallas Times Herald. The National Council Institute, part of the U.S. Public Health Service, was by now spending a hefty $20 million a year on cancer research, and Hoxsey pleaded his case as the agency headquarters in Bethesda, Maryland. The NCI Chief Director R.R. Spencer explained that Hoxsey needed to submit 50 cases that is historical of internal cancer only, including verified biopsies. Dr. Spencer emphasized to Hoxsey that revealing his formulas was a precondition of any evaluation. Every way, that is, Hoxsey flinched. He was suspicious that this was merely the latest ploy by Dr. Fishbein to attain his precious secret, which he guarded as jealously as drug companies routinely protect their priorities, methods, he said. He did agree to submit the necessary case histories. Following the meeting, Dr. Spencer fired off a letter to Dr. Morris Fishbein, relating the fact that Hoxsey did not seem inclined to reveal his formulas. The NCI chief added that Mr. Hoxsey seemed to have a persecution complex and states that he has been treated very unfairly by the AMA many years ago. He says you and the former president of the AMA, Dr. Harris, thought his remedy to be somewhat worthwhile and would have taken it up if he assigned over to you personally the entire rights. Dr. Fishbein replied testily by dismissing Hoxsey as a liar. After a month later, Hoxsey supplied the NCI with 60 case histories, but having been blackballed in the medical community, he was unable to provide biopsies in numerous cases. Instead, he supplied the names of laboratories, hospitals, and doctors where they could be attained. He presumably correctly through the authority of the federal government. What ensued was a bilious dispute over the state of Hoxsey's records. The NCI responded with a letter that 15 to 20 cases of internal cancer lacked biopsy. It further characterized the other 40 cases as inadmissible since they related to external cancer and that the majority of these also lack biopsies. Obviously, the terse rejection concluded this does not meet the policy of the Advisory Council. Hoxsey adamantly contested the NCI analysis. What the NCI called externals includes cases in which there was evidence in the spread of disease. It provided specific records of biopsy from Dallas Pathological, including Dr. Marvin Bell, where the NCI told there was none. Dr. Bell, however, has changed his tune after being chastised for his association with Hoxsey. Where 6 years earlier he found cancer, now he wrote the NCI, the slide I find on Mrs. O.G. Brown shows chronic inflammation in tissue, and I do not know whether I was foolish enough to cart this concoction carcinoma at the time, or possibly I had another slide which did show carcinoma and was accidentally discarded at the time. Dr. Bell's brush with the AMA and Texas medical authorities discouraged him from acknowledging any potential favorable data related to supposed Hoxsey's cures. The status of Hoxsey's cases dissolved into nebulous confusion. You got to ask yourself, folks, this question. Why is this one guy a problem? Why is the AMA so determined to destroy him? Why do they want the remedy, but they're not willing to basically use it to help people and not charging a super fee for it? Who is the liar here, folks? In fact, there was already in full swing a concerted effort against Hoxsey involving the NCI, the AMA, the FDA, and Texas medical authorities. The NCI had been in prior contact with Dallas County Medical Society since at least since 1941, when the agency received a letter seeking help to prosecuting Hoxsey and complaining about his brochure mailings. The NCI responded that such matters were not under its jurisdiction and also suggested enlisting the Post Office Department for fraudulent use of the mails. Meanwhile, the Dallas substation of the Federal Food and Drug Administration, spurred by Dr. Crow, had been in close contact with the AMA Bureau of Investigation for years. Dr. Heller's letter to Dr. Fishbein was but the latest instance of close contact medical officials maintaining the ingrown world of cancer treatment. Frustrated in his latest effort for the investigation, Hoxsey returned in his thriving clinic to encounter a case that would permanently alter his fortunes. Ranch wife Delta Mae Nelson had uterine cancer that had been intensely treated with 20 units of X-ray and 36 hours of radium. She was so badly burned from the radiation that she couldn't even pull a sheet over her body for a year after. She wasted, that is, she lost weight to 86 pounds. She was bleeding internally, so severely impaired that she had to learn to walk all over again. Then the cancer recurred. Delta Mae's daughter, Mildred Nelson, was a young home care nurse at the time, the eldest of her 7 children. She already watched her family's hopes fade. The doctors will look at us, Mildred recalled, as we filmed her in 1984 and say, we've done everything we can do. Our hands are tied. It's just a matter of time and you're going to lose her. While working for a sick patient near her patient's ranch outside of Fort Worth, Mildred faced a fearful predicament. Dad asked me, do you want to go to Texas with me and drive for me? And I said, oh, you're going to get some parts for the Caterpillar. Nope, I'm going to see the doctor. What doctor? The cancer doctor. I said, Dad, we're going to see the best there is, so just forget about it going to see a damn quack. And he said, well, I'm going down anyway. If you don't want to go, it's fine. I said, no, I'll go with you. So we'll get down there. Mildred continued, and he introduced me. He tells Harry I'm a nurse, and Harry said, there's a doctor and a nurse working in there. Go in and talk to anybody you want to. There's the files. Get in them if you want to, and you will like her job. Dad looked at him and said, no, she's already said you are a damn quack. I didn't feel very good about that because I thought he shouldn't betray my confidence. But anyway, well, I thought I talked to Mom out of it and get them away from there, and then I would talk to them. Well, I couldn't. They didn't budge. I thought as soon as I get off this case, I'll go down there and go to work and see what's going on, and then I can get them out of there. So when I got off that case, I called Harry and asked if he still needed a nurse. He said, "Yeah, I sure do. I'd be here in the morning." Man, that's amazing. This is how people are supposed to work. It's by integrity, talking with one another and making it work. I found me a little apartment and went to work. Positioned in her new job, Mildred was alert for the damning evidence she expected to uncover inside the clinic. It was probably a year before it really began to set with me what was going on. As the patients would come in, sometimes we didn't see them for 3 months or 6 months. Then I began to see the changes that would take place and hear their stories of, well, my doctor told me I had 30 days to live, or my doctor gave me 3 months to live, and 6 months has gone by. By the end of the year, I began to realize, gee, this does work. Mom has gotten better and to this day is alive and as sassy as can be. And when the doctors look at you and say, it's only a matter of time, I've done everything there is to do. Our hands are tied. Just get prepared. I know what they're talking about. We filmed in 1986 with Delta Mae Nelson and Mildred at Mildred's Horse Ranch outside of Dallas. A spiry, alert woman, about 85 years old. Delta Mae never did tell her doctor that she went to Hoxsey. I outlived the doctor, she reported cheerfully. Two of the local doctors and the doctor in Fort Worth have also passed away. The nurses, too, have all passed away. As far as I know, I outlived all of them. Delta Mae Nelson died in 1997 of natural causes at the age of 99 years old, 51 years after her cancer almost took her life. That's not a good report. So this lady was born, looks like in 1898. She died in 1997, almost 100 years old. And her mother's successful treatment, Mildred surrendered to the Hoxsey experiments. When I first went to work for Harry, he was on Bryant and Pete, which was a very small building. We had 2 treatment rooms and an office, and the waiting room was quite small. I couldn't believe that so many people could come to one little building. When the patients arrived, there was no place in the waiting room, so they'd go back to the car. When you got to this particular name on the list, they didn't answer in the waiting room. You go trampling off down the street and to each car and thought, my God, did I go through nursing training for this? But people were so nice about it. Like James Burke and Al Tempton before her. Mildred converted from a skeptic into a believer. Harry would tell this wild story about this patient had this and this, and they got well, or he had sent all these records to the Food and Drug or the NCI, and they wouldn't check anything. And I'd say, my God, he's telling me the biggest lies I've ever heard. This couldn't be right. And I listened to this for a few days, and finally I picked out the biggest one I thought he told me. And I go check, and when I got checking, it was right. The man hadn't lied about it at all. He was telling the truth. But it's the wildest story that I've ever heard in my life when it came to medicine. Mildred's admiration for Hoxsey increased as she got to know him. She didn't work for him. You worked with him. He was a big man, a big heart, and a fantastic mind. Lots of love and compassion for people. They, in return, had a lot of love for him. But I think he naturally gave more than they. It's a picture of the waiting room. It's people's, wow. People would have problems, and in his pocket, his hand went. He'd give you the shirt off his back, but didn't even try to make it away from him because you had a hell of a fight. He butchered the King's English. His best friend was an SOB, but he wouldn't have been Harry's without it. Wouldn't have been without it. Mildred recollected the characteristic of Hoxsey's presence in the clinic. Things would get to the rolling along kind of bad and look a little rough, and all of a sudden, out of the clear blue sky, when somebody's chin was on the floor, Harry would look up and say, well, I believe love is here to stay. What do you think about it? There's too much love in this world for it to ever sink. Everybody laughed, and here we do it again. Here we go again. The clinic flourished, and Mildred saw the effect it had on the surrounding community. A number of taxi drivers bringing people back and forth would say, boy, if I ever get cancer, I'd be here. I talked to too many people. The airlines began to wake up to what was going on. The bus drivers knew what was going on. They say, we don't know anything about medicine, but we see these people getting well like this. If they heard of somebody, they bring them. You see, it was word of mouth. That's the best type of advertisement in the world, folks. Mildred recalled that Hoxsey had a photographic mind who never forgot a patient's face or name or how much was owed to the penny. He was absolutely uncanny in dealing with people. He was left-handed, and he was so straight to see him with his left hands cutting out bandages, but it was fit perfect when he got through with it. He had a sixth sense if somebody was sick. He seemed to have almost a psychic thing of what would work for this particular person. Stepping through the looking glass, Mildred now found herself aligned with the very person she had demonized as a quack. She didn't know how to respond to the same charges now being made against her. Hoxsey invoked the words of his late father. As far as it being called a quack, he said, "Oh, I've been called a lot worse things than that, but through the years, somebody would say something about it, and I'd be upset as could be ranting and raving about it." And he said, "Wait a minute, Millie. Remember one thing. Whatever they think, there's one thing they can't do, and that's put the cancers back on those little people that we have taken them all." Decidedly apolitical, that is apolitical, Mildred settled into the role as a gal Friday of the Hoxsey Cancer Clinic. You couldn't buy a worker like Millie, observed Hoxsey's son. She was totally dedicated as a nurse. Everyone loved her. She ran the staff of doctors with an iron hand. Hoxsey would soon trust her with mixing the medicine in the basement while he increasingly attended to the new rash of trials in cancer politics, barring his path to acceptance. If only they would investigate and see the percentages he was getting well. But they didn't want to know the truth, folks. That's the whole idea, you see. Mildred remembered him complaining. If they could prove he wasn't doing this, he closed the doors himself. I don't know of anyone else that could anyone else that could have ever fought the battles he did for as long as a period of time as he did. After an Oklahoma child was reportedly cured by Hoxsey, the boy's father approached Senator Thompson. Thompson served in the Oklahoma State Senate from the founding of 1907 to 1920, before ascending to Congress and the Senate. A populist and supporter of the farmer, he backed the New Deal, restricted and resisted corporations, and maintained close ties with his grassroots constituents. Yet he was ill prepared for the thorny medical politics about to draw his blood. When prosperous Oklahoma contractor Tom Chapman shared with Thomas the story of his child's recovery at the Dallas clinic, he also told the senator how the Oklahoma Medical Society rejected his personal offer to sponsor a Hoxsey test of 25 patients under his supervision. Following a similar rejection from the the American Cancer Society, Chapman approached the senator in consultation. They didn't want to solve the problem here, folks. They're kicking the can down the road. He didn't fit the bill. Senator Thomas visited a dozen of Hoxsey's patients from the Lawton area and listened to their fantastic cures. Hoxsey wired Senator Thompson to come to Dallas while 15 osteopaths would be touring. When the law arrived February 2nd, 1947, Hoxsey brought in 125 alleged cured patients amid a mock transcript of proceedings in a quasi-legal setting. Hoxsey upped the ante with a bold challenge to treat 100 ex-servicemen free of charge. If he failed to cure 80% of them, he promised to close the clinic and stop treating cancer. The senator personally interviewed over 25 of the cases, focusing on Texans and Oklahoma, and held a press conference with the AP and the United Press Wire Service, as well as other reporters on hand for the show. "I would like to have as much of the record as I can get," Senator Thomas told the Homolage. "I shall present that then to the medical heads of the bureaus in Washington, and I shall ask them to take steps in the investigation." He went on to say, "I'm not a doctor and I don't know cancer when I see it. However, I feel that I have gone into the matter sufficiently to justify asking medical authorities to investigate further. If this is a real cure for cancer and evidence here today, it should at least be given a fair test and made available to the world. If not, the man must be exposed." Senator Thompson wrote to Surgeon General Thomas Parran, Parran, whose authority extended to the NCI, requesting an investigation. The negative reply came bundled with copies of anti-Hoxsey JMA articles and the admonition that it would be imprudent to spend public fundings on such a project. See. After 4 months of fruitless effort, Thomas, that is the senator, wrote to Hoxsey, "It seems that the medical fraternity is highly organized and that they have decided to crush you and your institution, if at all possible. I've had a few rounds with the heads of all the medical organizations as well as the public health service here in Washington. It seems that the public officials are afraid that if they make any move or say anything antagonistic to the wishes of the medical organization, they will be pounced upon and destroyed." Of course they would be. In other words, the public officials seem to be afraid of their jobs and even of their lives. In the next election, the AMA lobbied heavy against Senator Thomas, and he was defeated, receding into private law practice. He continued to support the treatment, directing numerous patients to Dallas. Two members of the Oklahoma State Legislature attempted investigation concurrent with Senator Thomas efforts. Representative Charles Osman, Ozman, and Senator Homer Hall introduced a resolution for a joint legislative investigation of Hoxsey. Senator Paul charged from the floor that Dr. Fishbein was personally blocking a test. The AMA vehemently opposed the resolution, which nevertheless passed. A joint committee of 10 senators and representatives, as well as 3 medical advisors, traveled to Dallas on March 11, 1947. At the start of the hearings, 4 members were conspicuously absent. Representative Dr. A.E. Henning and the 3 medical advisors arrived late because they had been seriously closeted with the Dallas County Medical Center. Hoxsey trotted out his cured patients and provided case histories of internal cures. He waited several weeks in vain for a response and made a couple of trips to Oklahoma City to track the matter. The final report from the legislature advised that Hoxsey refused to reveal the contents of the medicine, makes it impossible to evaluate its possible effects. He called the case to historians insufficient and concluded that the medicines had no beneficial effect on cancer and were toxic. Senator Paul objected fiercely to the report. We can never get any cooperation in Dallas cure from the American AMA, and I might as well say the Oklahoma Medical Association too. These doctors who went with us down there stayed through the meeting with fear and trembling in their heart. We tried to get them to help us make out a report, but they wouldn't do it until they had contacted the AMA to find out what to do. Senator Paul noted that the stated reason the 60 case histories were deemed inadequate was that the physicians had not examined the patients firsthand. I know what they said, he retorted. They're afraid of having their license revoked. This is all about fear, folks. Hoxsey claimed that some of the doctors nevertheless covertly bootlegged patients to him for many years afterwards. So he was telling the truth. Hoxsey complained bitterly that once again the AMA sandbagged an investigation by coercion and innuendo. They all said they've been treated unfairly and that medicine won't pay attention to them. The AMA Oliver Field told our camera crew about quacks in general and Hoxsey in particular. It's true because medicine does know that their products are worthless. If they had any merit, they would be used. If it's rather unfair thing, really, to expect the AMA to waste its time with something that it knew was absolutely useless. In other words, the AMA didn't have a cure, folks, but yet they would not show their hand. But yet he was actually helping people, and they wanted him to show his whole hand. You see, they wasn't playing fair. Undauntedly, Hoxsey kept building clinic. In 1946, he hired Dr. Joseph Durkee, an osteopathic doctor who became the shining star of Hoxsey's staff for the next 6 years. A sophisticated physician dedicated to natural medicine. Dr. Durkee began to keep the proper records Hoxsey never had, initiated extensive research. Along with Mildred Nelson, he became a trusted associate just as the clinic started its rapid expansion. Hoxsey kept the formulas in a bank safe deposit box in case of his death, while Dr. Durkee swore to stay with him till the bell rings. In 1946, Hoxsey moved from his overflowing facility at Bryant and Peak into 4507 Gaston Avenue, the former again Spain Sanitarium. He said he bought it from Dr. Spann, but the word on the street was that he won it in a game of dominoes with an unlucky realtor. An inveterate gambler, Hoxsey also frequented the racetrack, that is, and started holding weekly poker games at his house with prominent local citizens, including Judge Al Templeton and Joe Brown. As the clinic grew and receipts rose, he made $10,000 donation to each of their campaigns. Wow. Hoxsey had further cause to celebrate after years of bad luck wildcatting. The incorruptible gambler struck oil. That's right, I remember reading this. Dad and his partner dug 13 dry holes, recalled his son. Finally, his partner ran out of money and had to bow out. Dad hit a gusher on number 14. He gave his partner 50% anyway. Hoxsey's daughter added, Dad always loved the long shot. If it was a sure thing, he wasn't interested. As a Dallas TV newsman, that is Jimmy Kerr, observed, I remember one time I was in Hoxsey's office, and he told this woman who was a cancer patient, if I can't cure you in 3 months, see that Cadillac out there, that window there? I'll buy it for you. As I recall, the woman died and never did get that Cadillac. Hoxsey delighted in buying cars for his friends and donating an organ to his church. It's hard to believe this guy had this much charisma. And he fit the bill, folks. He was one in a billion. Now Hoxsey could finance his court battles with impunity and lavish cultivate his diamond gem persona. I don't have to do this kind of work, he bragged about his clinic. I've got more oil wells than a lot of men who call themselves big producers. I have enough money to burn up a wet mule. So what do I need with money from cancer sufferers? See, he had a good heart. Any man that would traffic on the sick, the dying, the limp, the lame, and the blind caused from cancer is the worst scoundrel on earth. Quote from him. Witnessing Hoxsey's sharp accent and sudden wealth, Dr. Fishbein once more dipped his pen in crimson ink for the journal with a searing editorial entitled Hoxsey, Cancer Charlatan. He invoked demons that would come back to haunt him. Of all the ghouls who feed on the bodies of the dying, the cancer quacks are the most vicious and the most heartless. Fishbein then threw an interval jab at Senator Thomas and the Oklahoma legislature. Apparently, Hoxsey had been successful in hoodwinking and deceiving eminent jurists and other important persons to the extent that they had given him tacit, if not actual support. Apparently, his performance and his success had caused him to believe that it is now possible for him to exploit widely his method of treating cancer and that he can get away with it. Harry Hoxsey had more than 20 years in which to prove such virtues as might have existed in his method. Such proof had never been foregoing. How long will the complacency authorities of such states as Texas continue to tolerate Harry M. Hoxsey? The journal article provoked the Dallas County Medical Society into yet another sensational lawsuit charging Hoxsey with illicitly performing an operation on the breast of a patient who later died as a result of the treatment. The first trial ended in a hung jury, but the woman's husband brought him back into the court on a $5,000 civil suit before Judge W. L. Thornton, who had earlier ordered an end to the medical society harassment in the clinic. Charged with negligence for performing the operation and administration of his worthless treatment, Hoxsey was acquitted on all charges. The verdict suggests that the woman's death was related to stopping the Hoxsey treatment and having more surgery and radium resulting in death from cancer. Treating the matter approved by the AMA. One local paper ran the Mercury headline, Jury Rules, Doctor Finds Cancer Cure. Addressing the jury after the verdict, Judge Thornton said, I dare say you will never sit on a case of greater importance or one in which the public is greater concerned. To explain the startling victory, some eyewitness said it was the best kept secret in Dallas that Judge Thornton's sister was on Hoxsey's tonic during the trial. I know more political people in Texas. Hoxsey boasted and can control any office. I guess at Hoxsey's quote-unquote upset victory, Dr. Fishbein decided to lift the controversy outside of medical journeys to center stage in the public media. He jointly authored what he called Blood Money in the American Weekly, the Sunday magazine supplement of the Hearst newspaper chain. The installment of Cancer Quackly was part of a lavish 6-part medical hucksters series. It strutted Fishbein's perfect prose and yellow journalism, lacerating his favorite target, that is Harry Hoxsey. The tirade smoldered against the lurid four-color printing of a frock-coated Dickerson figure wearing white spads and diamond stick pins. The nefarious charlatan was taking money from the limp, outstretched fingers of a woman on her deathbed, while her faithful children looked on with tragedy false hope. And this is amazing. Wow, you talk about mud raking. So it continues on. Blood money left little to the imagination. All the other wicked medical fakes, firing hope and darkness into despair, paled beside the savagery of the cancer charlatan. They look like men, they speak like men, but in them, prevailing them, besides a quality so malevolent that it sets them apart from others of the human race. Even in this time of scientific and social progress, they brazenly dare the daylight. When Stone Age lures they call. The credulous believe. They slay their patients as guilty as if they knifed them in the heart, and they stay within the letter of the law. The figure bank blood money among today's cancer healers of the AMA charges a former coal miner is boldest, has the largest following, and even has engaged the interests of some prominent men. He is Harry M. Hoxsey, who inherited a cancer cure from his father, a dabbler in veterinary medicine, faith healing, and cancer curing, who himself died of cancer. The American Medical Association condemns the clinical operations of Huxley's cancer charge. First of all, folks, Harry's father did not die of cancer. It's a fucking lie. The article went on to recycle, that is, Fishbein's previous denunciation against Hoxsey for hoodwinking eminent jurists and failing to prove his methods in 20 years of opportunity. Hoxsey was livid as being defamed and humiliated in the Sunday papers and living rooms across the land. He claimed the article hurt his business at the clinic, which now had 2,000 patients. Though he might have been expected to have developed a rather thick skin by this time, he moaned that the article deeply wounded his feelings. Every time I read it, where they mention my father's death or anything else, I have a very nervous lapse. I have to stay home in bed. His father didn't die of cancer, folks. Hoxsey moved to sue the Voice of American Medicine as well as the Hearst newspaper chain and the article co-author William Engel, seeking $1 million for libel and slander. He was taking on not only the nation's most powerful doctor, but also one of the country's former media empires. And Hoxsey received the exasperating news that he could legally sue only the Hearst newspapers, which had published the story in a Texas outlet. The elusive Dr. Fishbein remained inviolated. You see, he was very coy, safely nested in Chicago outside the Texas court jurisdiction. Fishbein boasted he had been sued for $35 million by quacks without paying a single dollar in damages. Hoxsey didn't seem to stand a chance. Nevertheless, he was determined to lift Dr. Fishbein's iron curtain and speak truth to power for the world to hear. Do you understand what's going on here, folks? Do you understand? This guy has got a cure. This guy's got a cure. And if they destroy him, there's no one else who's going to pick up the ball. Do you understand that? He's a bulldog. His personality is he has to fight back. There's no other way. He was born for this. While Hoxsey burrowed in, Dr. Fishbein's unvulnerability was cracking under mounting notoriety, as Milton Meyer wrote in Harper's. He had loved the AMA as he loved himself, and greater love had no man. Organized medicine might be a little seedy to his critics. He was always young and fair to Fishbein. The trouble was that under his loving care, it was fading fast away. Physicians who were interested in something besides their fees resented their identification with his low comedy routine. Worse, the routine wasn't stemming the rising tide of protests in as well as out of the medical profession against the inaccessible medical care to millions of Americans. Morris Fishbein not only had an American dream, he was one. In his square-fingered hands, he held the priestly power of 140,000 men in white. He knew 10,000 practitioners by name, and among those 10,000 were what Fishbein calls the man who count. The AMA membership was a model of detail. We keep track of everything and everybody. Wow. And the editor, with a small smile, Fishbein did the association shoe leather work. He did its lung leather work too. And that was his peculiar genius. Non-members of the AMA were the scum of Fishbein's earth. Medicine was and still is good for limitless exploitation. When Fishbein set himself up in business, it was a virgin territory. Medicine needed a spokesman. It got a spittler. The conviction was spreading inside the profession that Morris Fishbein was bad medicine. Dr. Fishbein's sanctimonious image as guardian of the public health was losing its blush. Writers of the period such as Morris Beale and mudraking journals whose prodigious prose read more like sports writing than medicine journal document the onset of the corporatization of medicine-backed Fishbein AMA. He chronicled the virtuous rise of the pharmaceutical industry, whose revenues by 1940s already existed $10 billion, an astronomical sum at that time. It was no secret that the drug industry had long been the advertising mainstay of the journal. Beale's writings, widely read book, Medical Mussolini, his scantily cartoons satirizing the nation's leading position as a totalitarian medical dictator with cookie-cutter doctors goose-stepping behind him. Even Warner Brothers movie studio had gotten skittish about escalating public protests over the Good Doctor's fraud-fighting films. When it's about to start production on Your Life is in Their Hands, a AMA-sanctioned anti-quackery short. The movie company sent Dr. Fishbein a nervous note. We're getting hundreds of letters from people all over the country, mostly chiropractors and osteopaths, and about 7 other kinds of paths and 10 or 12 isms. Strangely enough, we have yet to receive a letter from an MD encouraging us to go on with this idea. And I hope very soon they balance the scales of fan mail so that we will feel that we have at least a little moral support. Now, the project precipitated such an uproar that the studio abandoned the movie. So you can see the handwriting is beginning to change here. When Dr. Fishbein pointed proudly to the AMA Bureau of Investigation Quack Files, now numbering 300,000 names, he only fueled countercharges of targeting anyone who stayed away from the narrow AMA line. His stand against national medical insurance, which he invariably called communism, Nazism, and socialism, was courted widespread public and professional insurrection. Dr. Fishbein's AMA was already under pressure from a stunning 1937 court conviction of conspiracy for restraint of trade and monopolistic practices, a verdict upheld by the Supreme Court in 1943. The AMA was found guilty of trying to destroy autonomous doctors group applying cost-cutting health delivery and insurance in Washington, D.C. Subsequently, Dr. Fishbein was muzzled by the National Board from speaking publicly on sensitive issues, and his stock was trading low by the time Hoxsey came after him. As Time magazine put it, last week the AMA met in San Francisco. The Californians put on their rubber gloves and prepared at last for a fish binettery. Hoxsey was alert to Fishbein's travels and gambled that it was time for the tables to turn. As the trial grew closer, he sent word to Dr. Fishbein through Roy Topper of the Chicago Herald America that he was sure of winning the case. He's a millionaire and does not want the money. He doesn't want to get at the throat of Dr. Fishbein, who he claims is constantly lambasted him through the medical associations of the quack. Hoxsey offered to drop the charges if Topper could get the good doc to come down there to come look into his clinic and see for himself. He ended with a challenge to cure 65% of cancer cases or shut the doors forever. Topper got no reply to the message. As expectations of the epic courtroom confrontation ballooned, Hoxsey started to draw attention from other mainstream medical groups that had scrumptiously ignored him for so long. When the influential American Cancer Society, a mainstay of the cancer establishment, sent its representative Pat McGrady Sr. to have a look, he found Hoxsey in a bold mood. We've got a real scientific place, the clinic operator told McGrady with a typical bravo, and immediately cut to the session with Dr. Fishbein. I got him this time. I have the whole bunch of them come down and testify, and then the world will know what kind of work I'm doing. I'm going to have my witnesses get up and tell how we cure them. What do you say to that? Amid what McGrady describes as country people of modest circumstances, he beheld great and ugly tumors mingle with the stench of cancer. The American Cancer Society official got a gregarious tour from his host. I know that Fishbein controls your society, Hoxsey taunted him. You people act under orders from him. This, to me, is a hobby. I want to cure cancer everywhere. If it's taken up, I'll just wind up business here and get out my fishing rod and gun and spend the rest of my life on my ranch. I got more money than I could use in 17 million years. If we got something, let's show it. If not, let's expose it. If they could show I'm not curing cancer, I'll close up and go to my ranch. I'll get this place to the blind. McGrady visited extensively Dr. Durkee, who had brought rigorous record keepings to the clinic for the first time and could now address specific concerns about the modalities and success rates for types of cancer. Like Hoxsey, Dr. Durkee claimed a 85% success rate for external cancers and a 25% for internal cancer that already received the limit of surgeries and radiation. For breast cancer, he claimed a 50 to 60% cure. Hoxsey complained that his clinic was a dumping ground for the terminal patients of Dallas doctors, and he had to turn away 20%, the hopeless cases, he said. He claimed an 80% cure rate for patients with internal cancer who had not received prior surgery or radiation. So see, when people do this, your chances are less. Dr. Durkee held an exalted position You see, within the National Medical Society, an alternate to the AMA that was growing rapidly with the many MDs, naturopaths, chiropractors, and osteopaths espousing natural medicine practices. Hoxsey's first position was Dr. Bruce Miller, was now the president of the society, which openly opposes the AMA monopoly on medical practices and challenges political incorrect position blocking national health insurance. As the wide popularity of the National Medical Society attests, the country's mood was less than sympathetic to the AMA's politics of unenlightened self-interest. While Hoxsey prepared for the trial, Mildred kept the clinic humming. I'll go crazy, she recalled with a laugh. I'll be so nervous, but he loved it. He had a ball the whole time. I'll lose 10 pounds, and Harry would just be putting them on, just as happy as he could be. We're going to win this, then you will have to listen to it. It was happening every 6 months, so you'd think I'd get accustomed to it, but I never did. It was always ugly. The Hirsch trial commenced amid whistling flash bulbs in a thronged courtroom on March 16, 1949, before Judge William Hockley Atwell. A highly respected jurist, Atwell was feared as a hanging judge, a tough, terse figure, 47 of his 80 years spent in district court. His customary sanitary directive to attorneys was to the guests. The trial was a who's who of American medicine. It lasted for 3 days and 2 nights sessions. Judge William Hockley Atwell would rule twice in Hoxsey's favor in federal courts and produce 80 witnesses, 80 written exhibits, and a numbering 2,000-page record. Hoxsey sent out penny postcards to all his patients to pack the courtroom. The Hoxsey plaintiffs opened the proceedings with a scientific explanation of Hoxsey's treatment delivered by Dr. Durkee. Finally, however, Dr. Fishbein was about to get the MacGuffin. Under court order, the defense compelled Hoxsey to reveal for the first time the ingredients of his three main remedies. He said the internal tonic contained potassium iodine and herbs including, here they are, folks, Cascara, C-A-S-C-A-R-A, S-A-G-R-A-D-A, buckthorn bark, prisley ash bark, red clover, stillingia, S-T-I-L-L-I-N-G-I-A, alfalfa, and honey drip syrup. He cited all the ingredients as being listed in the homeopathic materical expounding on the philosophical difference between allopathic and homeopathic medicine. In contrast with allopathic belief, the homeopathic school relied on supporting the body's own defenses to heal itself, which is what Dr. Durkee explained the tonic herbs served to do. When the Hoxsey called his first patient, witness to the stand, the defense objected to the rationale that lay people are not qualified to testify to their own medical condition. The patient endorsement, agreed Robert Heath of the Dallas County Medical Society, is really not the best way to evaluate a medical treatment or procedure. Oftentimes, these individuals are not knowledgeable enough in their own health to realize they are not the ones to make the best decisions or assessments. While Hoxsey was intent on proving his cure, the defense was focused on excluding from the record any favorable testimony by the treatment. Their objection to Hoxsey's patient witness was ironic. However, in that era, anecdotal case histories were commonly used by the medical profession itself as proof of efficacy. It was not until after World War II that formal clinical testing to prove therapies began, and not until 1960s that it became widespread. By trying to strike the spirits of Hoxsey's patients from the record, organized medicine was employing a obviously double standard. Judge Atwell overruled the objection and admitted the heart-rending patient testimony. 57 reputed Hoxsey cures took the stand, repleted with graphic before and after photographs of grotesque cancers come and gone. Hoxsey noted the fact that he never guaranteed cure and lost many patients whose cases were too far gone. He further protested that he was not in it for the money, illustrated by the innumerable charity cases he took on. Hoxsey's lawyer, Jimmy Martin, and Herbert Hyde brought forth disturbing medical testimony on the limitations of conventional cancer treatment, including the fact that radium X-ray causes cancer. That's why I don't go to get X-rays many times. I hate it to do it even in the dental office. We have something better out there too, folks. It's not X-rays. This system X-rays has been around for almost over 100 years. There's a better way of doing it. There is. I'm trying to remember it on the top of my head here. On their cross-examination, several physicians witnessed for the defense were forced to concede the dangers of medical radiation. Jimmy Trombone Martin was one of Hoxsey's principal lawyers throughout the 40s and 50s. Nearly everyone in Texas had a nickname, and Martin got his from playing trombone in the orchestra pit of the 1920 silent movies such as The Gills Girls and The Ten Commandments. A former assistant U.S. attorney and district attorney, Martin was a skilled courtroom tactician, as well as a committed amateur Shakespeare actor with a Texas twang. We filmed the alert Auto Generation in his Dallas home in 1986. I'm kind of like Clarence Darren playing trombone, suggested in a measured southern drawl, judicially balanced the scales of justice. I never speculate on the guilt or innocence of my clients. I just deal with the facts. I heard many, many witnesses testify that they had cancer. Their doctor told them that they did and said, better get your affairs straight out because you can't live long. They said they didn't. They said they then went to the Hoxsey clinic and took the medicines and got well. So I asked those doctors, how do you explain that? They said he would have gotten well whether he'd done anything or not. Most cancers cure themselves. That's what they claim. But they don't have any proof of it, you see. All I know is what their witnesses say. They went to clinic and took that medicine and were cured. I think that's enough to support a verdict. And I get a verdict. And I'll get a verdict. So the Hearst defense codified Hoxsey's case into three types of phony cures. Those who never had cancer in the first place, you see. Those who were actually cured by prior conventional treatment. And those who still had a cancer or died. This is presupposition, folks. You can't do this shit. They do it now, but this is wrong. At a last refuge, they suggested any seemingly recovery could be the results of spontaneous remission. Unfortunately, Hoxsey's lawyers pointed out instances of spontaneous remission in cancers are scarce, about 1 in 100,000 cases. You hear that? We'll say that again. Huxley's lawyers pointed out instances of spontaneous remission in cancer are scarce, about 1 in 100,000 cases. Had all three oddities somehow found their way to Dallas, and many of these patients never actually had cancer, they went on. There must be an awful lot of misdiagnosis going on. Testimony and homespun courtesy of the salt of the earth, Hoxsey's patients laid bare the transparent maneuvering of the defense. One witness drew particular publicity, Thomas E. Truman of Waco, Texas, a first cousin of then sitting President Harry Truman, testified he was twice cured of skin cancers on his face. Mildred Nelson later recalled after he was cured, he said, well, I'm going up and talk to the president, which he did, but politics and medicine being entwined as they were, there wasn't anything he could do about it. But the president said to Tom, if he gets in trouble, he knows what to do. So the Hearst defense presented forceful testimony from prestigious cancer specialists that none of the ingredients of the Hoxsey tonic could possibly have any beneficial effect on cancer. They warned that one ingredient, potassium iodide, might actually accelerate the growth of cancer, although it was the only component of the tonics with any known medical uses as a treatment for syphilis. They were adamant in their conviction, Jimmy Martin observed. The doctors claimed they already knew from their medical education that his remedies had no efficacy at all, no cure. They were just set in their ways and adamant in their beliefs. And they never would give it serious consideration. They had a big business, you see. Naturally, were kind of jealous and thought he was taking business away from them. They never did say that, but that was the motive behind their proceedings, you see. On the stand, the Hearst lawyers slammed Dr. C. Von Huber, Hoxsey's chemist, who has submitted extensive scientific data on the tonic. They revealed that he had operated under various nomenclature around Texas, lied about his medical degrees, and left a weary trail of alcohol abuse, all of which was true. Correct. Once again, Hoxsey was easy to discredit. Then the Hearst lawyers played the joker in their deck, inducing a death certificate showing that Hoxsey's father died of cancer. They continued that John C. Hoxsey had traveled to St. Louis Hospital, specializing in cancer, and checked out several days later. They alleged that he had been diagnosed there with cancer of the jaw and received radium but rejected surgery. All records, however, had been destroyed, you see. The evidence death certificate they submitted lacked the signature of an attending doctor. But in its place, the Hearst lawyers applied a sworn affidavit from the widow of a local doctor. However, there was no biopsy, you see. You see how they turned the tables here, folks? Breaching steadfast the AMA policy regarding pathological proof. So in other words, they would want to do it their way, but when it came the other way, look the other. You see how they are? They're very hypocrites, big time hypocrites. However, prior journal editorials had repeatedly made the same allegations about John C. Hoxsey's death from cancer. Hoxsey was blindsided by the death certificate. He fiercely condemned the document as a crude fake. His own lawyers have been searching for the documents for many years since it seemingly disappeared from state and county records shortly after the AMA investigators first came to Tazewell in 1925. Hoxsey pointed out that the fake certificate had been filed in 1926, 7 years after John C. Hoxsey's death, and listed the wrong place of burial. Hoxsey did admit it, accompanying his father to the Missouri Cancer Hospital, but said the diagnosis was ERYSI epiphyseal, not cancer, and that his father took no treatment there. Judge Atwell nevertheless permitted the death certificate into evidence. Really bad. You don't have a signature of a doctor, folks. That's really sharing something. I don't know if I'd agree with that. Anyway, while Hoxsey was reeling from the shock, the Hearst lawyers riveted the courtroom by unwrapping their surprise witness. I don't know how Harry knew, but he did, chuckled Mildred. He knew what plane Fishbein was leaving Chicago on, what time he arrived in Dallas, and where he was staying. As Hoxsey's son recalled, like they used to say, they kept the motor running at Love's Field. He was supposed to leave town right after testifying. Nobody was supposed to know that Fishbein was in town, but Hoxsey knew. In fact, Dr. Fishbein had written a note to the Dallas doctor, strictly confidential. It's quite possible that I may spend some time in Dallas in case the Hoxsey lawsuit comes to trial. Somehow, somewhere, the news leaked. Fishbein confidently took the stand before lunch. He said his purpose for writing Blood Money was the expose of fraudulent medicine for protection of the public, and that has been routine practice in accordance with the principles and ethics of the AMA ever since it was founded in 1847. On the cross-examination, Fishbein admitted never having administered the Hoxsey treatment, nor any cancer treatment, but defended his authority regarding disease. The evasive witness, he ducked a protracted volley of tough questions. Dallas TV reporter General Jimmy Kerr described his presence. Fishbein was a real stickler on the stand. He was a fat little arrogant doctor and made quite a poor impression. During the lunch recess, Hoxsey slapped Fishbein with a subpoena in the hallway. Now that the doctor had set foot in Texas, he was vulnerable to being served with legal action. He would have to stand trial against Hoxsey after all. The nation's top doctor was visibly unnerved when he took the stand after lunch. The very same night the trial concluded, Judge Atwell rendered his oral opinion. Ever in circumspect, he reached for the high ground. I think we may enter this particular interesting field through the newest part of the greatest book we have. And that great book, as you will recall, there came a stranger who began to heal the afflicted, and the people did not believe him. And they came in great numbers to see for themselves. He finally made the big fisherman himself his convert and disciple, and one who really believed in him could enter a pool when it was being stirred, and he cured, and he had the faith. Not that the curative power was in the water, probably because it was the faith. So also there were two men who had sat for much time at the doors of the temple. They were blind. They knew whether they were blind or they knew whether they were blind or not, and as worshipers would come to enter the temple, they would seek alms from them, and when Peter and John came that way, they sought alms for them. And Peter and John, being disciples of the great master, said, We have no gold and silver, but such as we have we give unto thee. Arise and go away, and see as you go. And they arose and went away, and the people said they were not blind at all. You don't see it all, do you? They said, All we know is we were blind, now we see. That is where we enter here. There are 57 people who have taken the stand and said they had cancer. It must be granted that they are not learned diagnoses. Some of them have been treated for cancer before by those who were learned in their particular profession, and their ailment was pronounced cancer. They testified they went out to the plaintiff's place and were healed and made well, and the defendant wanted the court to not permit that testimony. I could not do that, and that is in here and must be considered. Judge Atwell then sidestepped the snake pit of passing judgment on the efficiency of Hoxsey's remedy. Pay your money and take your choice. Those who need a doctor, you think one side is the best, go and get him. If you think the other side is the best, you certainly have a right to go and get him. This is a free country. That is what we stand for here in America. Judge Atwell did rule that blood money did indeed libel Hoxsey. Yet he migrated the decision by declaring that it did but nominal damage because the quack brain and ingenious Hoxsey on the publicity controversy as he can above the American Medical Association by making people believe that they are hounding him. The court pronounced that Dr. Fishburne had acted not out of malice, but from mistaken sense of public duty. Judge Atwill further ruled that Hoxsey's father did die of cancer, but that the published statement was nevertheless libellous. He awarded Hoxsey $1 for the libel against him and another dollar for his father with court costs against the defendant. Hoxsey was esteemed at piercing Dr. Fishbine's arm at last. Though he drew more blood than money, he stood at the first man labeled as a quack to defeat the AMA on charges of libel and slander, and claimed he never wanted a money judgment. For years after he relished his court victory over Dr. Fishbine, even though it was only $2, folks. Adding with signature Hoxsey's hyperbole, "I have the money in my pockets to prove it." He failed to mention that it was all of $2. Hoxsey was, however, deeply angered by the defamation of his father's name. He blasted Dr. Fishbine and the AMs being the real goons for digging up his daddy's grave, but he was going to get another chance to clear his father's name. For 3 years, Dr. Fishbine tried to evade the second trial with Hoxsey. By this time, however, the prognosis was not good for the nation's premier physician. Only months after his humiliating defeat to Hoxsey, the AMA flatly dumped him. The Mildred Mader reported in Harper's, the AMA withdrew its seal of approval for Morris Fishbine. Just so there would be no misunderstanding, it beats his head in, cuts his heart out, and kicks him out into the street. As the atmosphere became unpleasant, said the voice of American medicine, picking himself up and straightening his necktie, "I quit in 5 minutes." Neither he nor anyone else had ever supposed that Dr. AMA might be fired. To be sure, the deed had to be done publicly. There was no other way to persuade the public that Fishbine wasn't American medical. Caesar was stabbed from all sides. Even the trustees of the AMA for 25 years, his echoes, felt they had to be shut of him. He had outraged them too. President of the association had come and gone, nameless, faithless, voiceless before the country. There was an infinite inside the organization and outside. Fishbine held all the strings, knew everything, was everywhere, did everything. The taunt of the American Fishbine Association was a telling one. The knives flashed like satin in the sun. When finally Hoxsey revealed Fishbine in the court in '52, it was a private citizen stripped of the bulletproof mantle of organized medicine. Rejecting 11-hour settlement offers, Hoxsey got his third day in court before Judge W.L. Thornton. He pitted his down-home patient against a blue-chip array of doctors from Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, and other elite cancer institutions. Telling defense made no attempts to resubmit the death certificate of Hoxsey's father. By now, Hoxsey and Jimmy Martin had traveled to St. Louis and Illinois and tracked down the records, including evidence that the original document had disappeared mysteriously from the official files. As Martin recalls, we examined the hospital records and the books where they had a notation of his father's entry and death. Somebody had trampled with that. It has been written down what he had died from, but they scratched it out. It was very obvious they inserted the word cancer. Somebody got paid money to do that, folks. The AMA allergic forgery was equal, however, by records that Hoxsey himself later provided, which also appeared to have been altered. Once again, conflicting accounts evaporating the swamp gas of medical politics. During the testimony of several external cases, Fishbine's lawyers stopped the proceedings with a staggering admission. The Fishbine defense conceded that Hoxsey's treatment does cure external cancer. "We don't deny that they cure cancer out there at that clinic," Attorney Julian C. Hyer, Hyer, reportedly said. It was a confounding reversal after years of condemning Hoxsey's brutal pace that eat into patients' blood vessels. However, even this disoriented turnaround was not the most jarring revelation to rock the courtroom. When Dr. Fishbine took the stand under cross-examination, the digging done by Hoxsey's lawyers paid off. Under oath, Dr. Fishbine made shocking admissions. He failed anatomy. Folks, this is what I want you to make this clear. He failed anatomy in medical school. He never completed his internship before going to work at the Journal. He never practiced a day of medicine or treated a single patient in his entire career. Dr. Fishbine was sweating profusely by the time he left the stand. He definitely was a quack. You see, he was the quack. As one who pretends to medical skills he does not possess, now reflected back in an unseemly mirror. The guy never passed medical school. He never completed his internship before going to work at the journal. He never practiced a day of medicine or treated a single patient in his entire career. This man caused harm to all many, many people. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury resoundingly decided all issues in favor of Hoxsey. But this time it found that Dr. Fishbane had indeed acted with malice in doing the things inquired about. Dr. Fishbane was no longer immune, the victim of his own journalistic nostrums. In his written opinion, Judge W.L. Thornton stated, "This is the second jury of 12 men that have found in my court that the Hoxsey treatment cures cancer. I am of the firm opinion that Hoxsey has cured these people of cancer, and the fact that this jury has answered all questions proves that Hoxsey has been done a great injustice, and that the articles and utterances by defendant Morris Fishbane were false, slanderous, and libelous." Again, the court found that Hoxsey unsustained no actual damages from the article and gave a monetary award of $1.05 for costs to the defendant. I feel that this will give Hoxsey a clear vindication, agreed the judge, which I know he was seeking far more than he was a money judgment. Hoxsey's lawyer, Jimmy Martin, reflected to our camera on Hoxsey's upset victory over the high priest of medicine, invoked one of his favorite Shakespeare lines in throaty Texan accents. "Thrice is his arm who hath his quarrel just." In some unerring way, Harry Hoxsey and Dr. Morris Fishbane form a perfect perverse symmetry. Like Mozart and Salieri, these investigation relationship magnificently serve both their ends while utterly scotching the professional exaltation they both so desperately yearn for. Hoxsey did appear to have the healing touch, you see, in his ancestry and seemed genuinely moved to be a doctor. It was an aspiration that Fishbane was ideally positioned to deny him. Hoxsey had been treating cancer since the age of 8 years old and must have been more of a disease than almost any physician. If he didn't believe in his remedies, it's hard to see why he would have suffered through the endless arrests, continual prosecutions, folks. Why do you not see this? Incessantly jeopardy and causation social humiliation. Sorry. If Fishbane did probably believe that Hoxsey's remedies were authentically valuable, he must have lamented the cosmic curse of finding them in the hands of an ex-coal miner so unworthy of the gift. As a doctor, Fishbane was a fraud. He exhibited no calling as a healer and never treated a patient. While Hoxsey was practicing medicine without a license, Dr. Fishbane was practicing license without medicine. Get it? His legitimate credentials were as a medical journalist and a physician, as which he is, at least in his millennium. Less like Hoxsey, he was unquestionably a true believer in his own brand of medicine. Many people considered Hoxsey a liar, and he routinely played rather wild with the truth, although apparently not about his medical cases, the central issue. On the other hand, Dr. Fishbane became the master of the big lie. Tell a lie big enough, often enough, and people will believe it. His false accusations about Hoxsey's external remedies and subsequent reversal are ample evidence that his own medicine credentials were a fiction, buried in a painful hypocrisy under the inflammatory tenor he brought to eradicate medical fraud that would fracture medicine for the rest of the century. Both men desperately wanted fame and recognition, yes, and each got it in his own way. They became masters of publicity and perfected their respective ticks. Tireless promoter Hoxsey and Fishbane graced the same pages of Time, Life, and Newsweek. Yet, as a folk healer during an era that condemned herbal and national medicines as unscientific and primitive, Hoxsey was tarred on his forced descent into Haitian underworld quackery. His unsoundly alliance certainly welded him with spikes and fins that repelled many potential allies. The receptive ego that drove him to be a big shot also made an easy target. His rough coal mining language and vulgar manner further skunked his innumerable potential supporters. But the two figures are reflected a deep class division, you see. Always the underdog. Hoxsey adopted a populist persona that seemed to have been genuine. His financial largeness towards his patients was an authentic expression of his political bona fides. His explicit battle against the medical trust reflected his conscious opposition to commercialization and monopolization of medicine by the interests of big business. When Hoxsey's father warned his boy about the high priest of medicine, who would fight you tooth and nail because you were taking money out of their pockets, the council prepared him for the cutting edge of the emerging medicine of medicine. As an underdog, not unlike Hoxsey, Fishbein was equally hungry for status. Born in 1889, St. Louis, Missouri, he was the son of a Jewish immigrant peddler who moved the family to unglamorous Indianapolis, you see. Yet Fishbein went on to gain social prestige he craved, molding into an urban, sophisticated hobnobbling with the rich and the famous. Dr. Fishbein has emphasized the politics of elitism, while Hoxsey was treating poor people for free. Fishbein was fiercely resistant to national medical insurance that would make health care affordable or accessible to millions of disenfranchised citizens. Simultaneously, under his directions, doctors became the single richest profession in the country. While Hoxsey was letting black people in the front door in a segregated Texas, Dr. Fishbein AMA was a club of white men that entirely barred blacks and women from membership. The contrast was also very human. One associate reported having dinner with Hoxsey, who ordered the most expensive item on the menu, a filet mignon, and then reproached the waiter for failing to bring ketchup. Dr. Fishbein would surely have ordered just the right Cabernet. Dr. Fishbein once revealed to his daughter his motivation for becoming a doctor. As a high school senior, he was coming home from school one afternoon when he encountered a crowd gathering around a man injured in a street fight. A small child, little Morris, was frustrated in his efforts to push his way through the crowd to behold the spectacle. Soon an ambulance drove up, he recounted, and the little fellow dressed in white with a black bag jumped out. Immediately the crowd parted for him. I decided to become a doctor. Morris Fishbein was intent on power, though. During his quarter of a century building the most powerful trade group in the world, the crowd parted for him. At the same time, he used that crowd to block Hoxsey from the recognition he hungered for. In the end, Hoxsey turned the tables on the high priest of medicine. It was a stubborn victory for the populist dark horse, hobbled for so long by his medical nemesis. Although the financial penalty was minuscule, the grand symbolism was not lost on the AMA. It was Hoxsey's spectacular victory over Dr. Fishbein that paradoxically ended up bringing down the house on both men. The ANA was increasingly tremendously over its potential liabilities in the escalating lawsuits resulting from Fishbein's zealous quarter-century of quack attacks and political escapades. The organization rid itself of him and deliberately deflected Hoxsey into a fine-tuned gears of the federal government. The AMA retreated from its exposed position at the front lines instead of enlisting the Food and Drug Administration to carry on the fight. Hoxsey would now indeed get an investigation, but it would not be a scientific one. So that's the end of chapter 6 here tonight. I wanted to share this story with you because it's the most important stories to be out here. I would appreciate if you would listen to this and if you would spread it to other people, because this is the truth. And that's what I'm about. I don't spend my time here, quote unquote, just sharing stories, folks. I am interested in the fucking truth. And I'll go to great lengths to find it. If I have to buy a book or search anything out, that is my heart's desire, because I'm tired of people who lie to people and tell people certain things like this Dr. Fishbein, which was not a doctor, you see. So we'll get into chapter 7. And the sad part simply is that he didn't get what he wanted, though, Hoxsey. We'll get to that chapter 7, maybe tomorrow. I appreciate you being here. It's most important that you understand that what is taking place. We've been lied to so much, folks. And it is important that you share this information. People are dying unnecessarily for this. People are dying because money is more important in someone's life. That's the problem. So I see Miss SOJ. Thank you for being here. I see you said it's disgusting. Yes, it's a story like when the stepmother told Cinderella she could go to a ball as long as she got all the chores done in a gown. if you do happen to win, they will make it a bitter pill. Yeah, yeah. Well, he struck. It's the interesting thing simply is that he was giving to other people. His life demonstrated what he believed in, and he stood his ground so many times. He was thrown in jail so many times, folks. He was maligned by everyone around him. He lost his businesses, many places where he tried to practice. And yet he was willing to help other people who had no money. We need more people like this in our society. So thank you for being here. Again, this is an important story. Basically, I see is a David and Goliath story, that he was a David and he fought and stood, and he was what we would say a coarse language he used. He wouldn't make friends, so to speak, but he was tenacious in what he knew because he knew he was helping people's lives. That's what counts here, folks. Not putting on a show. So thank you for being here. Thank you, Ms. SOJ. And you have a good evening too. You take care, and we'll talk to you hopefully another time on a video here. Have a good night. Take care.